Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn O'Zolins from the Shelter Island Public Library. Thank you for coming tonight to this very special presentation on resiliency, brought to you by the Shelter Island Health and Wellness Alliance and the library. I'd like to thank all the panelists very much for sharing their stories, and also thank the Health and Wellness Alliance for doing such a great job putting this together. Lucille Bergers, the Shelter Island Town social worker, is here as the moderator. And so I think with that, and just to remind you to, about the view, check your view. With that, I'll pass you over to Lucille. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Yes, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to this presentation. And I just wanted to let you know, it isn't by accident that we chose this date to present the program. Yesterday, we celebrated International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was the 77th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And we also recently celebrated Martin Luther King Day. Everyone is familiar with Martin Luther King, but an important champion of social justice and an important figure, prime example of resilience. Our discussion tonight is to acknowledge the trials and tribulations that as humans we endure, and the amazing capacity to continue forward. I'm reading a little bit because I don't want to forget anything, so excuse me. And the capacity to continue to move forward in life in spite of hardships and adversity. How are we able to do that when someone experiences circumstances such as the murder of 6 million Jews or the bombing of the World Trade Center? These atrocities are of such horrific magnitude, yet survivors can and do recover. It doesn't mean that they forget what they went through. Certainly there are scars, but they're able to move on and lead a productive life. Tonight, we have 5 panelists, all of whom have dealt with different circumstances. They will share their stories, and then we will have a Q&A discussion about their experience and what helped them get beyond. But first, I'll present some background in regards to the science of resiliency, so that we can have an understanding as to what can make a difference, and enough of a difference in people's lives so that they can handle difficulties that they might face. So some people don't like PowerPoints, but I do have one, and I hope that it's rather succinct, because the stories that our panelists have to share are really the essence of what we're here for tonight. But I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So we say resiliency, a work in progress, and we say that because it's something that you can continue to develop throughout your life. And as I mentioned earlier to some of the folks, that we learn from things that we go through, that we have the strength to endure. And when tough times come along, we think back to something maybe we went through previously and think, well, I got through that, so maybe I can get through this next thing. Okay. And we're really pleased to have the original artwork of Shelter Islander Peter Waldner to certainly lighten up the presentation a little bit. So here's one cartoon. You're the most resilient group of boys I've ever known. You can still win. Just don't give up. You have 1 inning left. Now let's get back out there and show everyone what you're made of. And then you hear the little player, Coach, we're down by 47 runs. And then you're kind of ruining the moment, kid. However, I might get back to this at some point. There's some things in here that do teach us about how this is important and does make a difference in these kids' lives. We all experience stress that comes from many sources. There's normal changes in our lives, like leaving home, having children, getting older, and there's always unexpected events, losses, job loss, winning. Yes, and winning the lottery. Yes, that even causes stress for a lot of people. And we've heard a lot of horrible stories about, people winning and losing everything and families taking advantage and all of that. So it's not always the best thing. Of course, we're impacted by all the developments in the world around us, and especially today, we certainly know we're going through a whole bunch of stuff. For instance, just in the last year, we had these horrible wildfires in Colorado, the terrible tornadoes in Kentucky, and down at the bottom left is the recent fire in the Bronx. And to the right is Hurricane Ida in the subways of New York City. And then, of course, here we go. I think we all know what this is. And we're all going through it, and we're still going through it. It's not gone, but it's getting better. And now, here locally, we're expecting this, a white blizzard, so a white hurricane, they call it. So at any rate, these are things that come up, and this is what happens throughout life. So let's get on to the definitions of resiliency, and there's a number of them, but they all certainly have sort of the same ring to them. One being the capacity to cultivate strengths to positively meet the challenges of life. And the typical one you hear is ability to bounce back from adversity. But I like this one. You bounce back, but you bounce back strengthened and more resourceful. There are a number of early researchers who studied the science and really started it. One being Emmy Warner, a child development psychologist, and the other one being Dr. Norman Garmazzi. They both came up with some of the same conclusions and started studying things way back in the 80s. Dr. Warner studied a group of people on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. They were in adverse situations, single parent families, alcoholism, etc. And she went there actually looking to figure out or expect negative outcomes from kids growing up in situations like that. But what they found out, she and her partner, Dr. Smith, they found that an enormous amount actually went on to thrive and did well. And they were really stumped by that. And so they switched their view about what they were looking for and decided to look at what went right instead of what was going wrong and what kind of conditions were going to have negative outcomes for these young people. So in the red at the bottom, you'll see they've identified a number of protective factors. These are key in the lives of the resilient individuals, which help to balance out risk factors at critical periods in their development. So as they looked at it and they felt that it provided us with a corrective lens to look at this, an awareness of the self-righting tendencies that move children toward normal adult development under all but the most persistent adverse circumstances. So it's not what happens to you, but what you make out of what happens to you that makes you resilient. Another cartoon here, it shows how this puppy made something out of what he went through. They called him Reggie, short for resilient. He's a rescue dog who was shot by a farmer. He's missing an eye, half his teeth, and has a bum leg, but he can still fetch the neighbor's paper for me. So the protective factors that I just mentioned, there are three primary protective factors that were identified by Warner and Smith. The most important one is number one, having caring adults. That means significant connections with an adult in their life, whether it be a parent, positive peers even, mentors. When asked about who was the most important person, the second most important person that young people named was a caring teacher. And that's something when I talk with teachers, I always try to emphasize, don't ever underestimate your influence. Having high expectations means that they believed in themselves and they expected well of themselves and had realistic expectations, but also they got messages from others about expecting well from them, just like the coach who had high expectations for his kids to go on in the last inning and beat the team, even though they were 47 runs down. Meaningful involvement, that helps provide purpose and a sense of belonging. It means a raison d'etre, a reason to be. And it's important to feel like, there's a reason for me to be alive and that I have a contribution to make. In this example, you will see that a caring adult isn't necessarily, this lady isn't exactly doing her job. It appears that her husband is in bad shape, and all she's got to say after he's asking just for a glass of water is, "You're really going to milk this, aren't you?" So it's not exactly what we're hoping for. So everyone has the ability to become more resilient. The innate self-righting tendencies and environmental protective factors provide a balance. This accounts for the resilience of young people facing adversity and challenge. These are precisely the same supports and opportunities that nurture us all throughout our life. So even though the studies are really based on young people, this is true for all of us. And the studies that Werner and Smith did were longitudinal, and they studied the populations all the way up through some of the young people when they got into their 50s. And I was fortunate enough actually to meet a person who was part of the study, and it was pretty amazing, I have to say. So Albert Einstein, we know him. He had to say, life is like riding a bicycle. And in order to keep your balance, you have to keep moving. Excuse me, my computer is acting up. Okay, so that's part of what we found with people. They were proactive, took action, and in order to maintain some type of a homeostasis in their lives, it's important to keep going. So he's moving all right. Another great researcher, her name is Bonnie Bernard, and I'll go back, I actually skipped it. She brought the, she brought this work that she got from Werner and Smith and Garmezi into the area of working in the field of prevention, which makes so much sense. If we are familiar and aware with the things that can make a difference in people's lives, then we can look for what is there or not there and try to help develop those pieces and insert them into someone's life so that they have a better chance at thriving. So we know that resilient people are socially competent. They display flexibility, empathy, have good communication skills. Sense of humor is critical. We know about, laughing in the face of adversity, that there's truth to that. They have a good ability to think abstractly and problem solve, a sense of internal locus of control and self-efficacy, and a sense of purpose and hope and for a brighter future. That healthy expectancies, goal-directedness, etc. So if we can, we try to get resiliency in all domains of our life. Physical, intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual. And any one of these and any one of the things that I've described, caring adults, high expectations, meaningful, any of those things, you don't have to have all of these things to be a resilient person. If you have one of them, even, can make enough of a difference. And that was found through the research, that sometimes things you didn't even think about really were things that help people get through day by day through the things that they were going through. So we will go through these later. I think right now we're going to turn to our panelists, and I will get out of the PowerPoint. And we will now allow for our panelists to tell their stories for us. And after that, we'll have a little discussion and allow them to have conversation between each other. And we will also entertain some questions in the chat, and we'll go from there. So the first person I'd like to introduce, it's my honor to introduce Anne Danforth, who is the daughter-in-law of a Holocaust survivor who actually only died in 2020. And she was quite a remarkable woman, and Anne is going to tell us about her, and we look forward to hearing the story. So Anne, go ahead.
Were you going to show the video first?
If that's what you would like, yes.
Yeah, why don't you do that so that
okay.
they know
Jocelyn. Let's see, Jocelyn, are you able to do that? There, okay.
Sorry, tech glitches, but I'm trying. Just give me a minute.
We get it. Tell us your mother-in-law's name again. It's Itka.
My mother-in-law's name, her name is Itka Freiman Zygmuntovich. And she was a survivor of the Auschwitz-Birkenau prison camp. Should I just continue until the?
Yeah, sure.
We don't realize what may
Oh, wait,
contribute to the
Oh, I
Holocaust.
think she's got it.
we don't see it though.
Okay. Got a little video of Itka actually
May
speaking.
13, 1983.
Jocelyn, you got to share the screen.
I don't.
This will certainly give you a sense of who Itka was and her amazing view about what she went through and how she got through.
Sorry, guys.
Well, we heard her, so you know you
Yeah.
you got it. There you go.
There we go.
Want to be like Cain or Abel. I don't want to be killed like my brother Abel. I don't want to be a killer like my brother Cain. I want to be my brother's keeper and not to cause anyone suffering and pain. I want to make this world a better place to live so that not one of God's children should ever know my deep suffering and grief. And what I believe is that if we don't become our brother's keeper, by not making the choice to do so, we become our brother's killer. Because the Holocaust didn't just happen because of the Nazis. It's the silent bystanders. Because one act affects us all. We only have what we give away. In the final analysis, the world is only as good or as evil as each individual. And like the Talmud teaches us, to save one life is like to save the whole world. Mengele was only one man, and he's responsible for the death of 400,000 Jews. Raoul Wallenberg was also one man. Schindler was one man, and they saved so many people.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Okay, so that was my mother, my mother-in-law, Itka Freiman Zygmuntovich, and as I said before, she survived years in the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. She spent her teenage years imprisoned by the Nazis, experiencing brutality and starvation until her liberation in April of 1945. At the end of the war, she was taken by the Red Cross to Sweden, and there she met her husband, Rachmiel, who was also a survivor. And they were married in 1946. My husband, Erland, was born in 1948, and his first brother, Jerry, in 1951. In Sweden, they experienced, Sweden was only intended as a place to recover and move on, not to settle. So also she tended not to feel very welcome there. But she always stood up for herself. So in 1952, the family immigrated to the United States and settled in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where she gave birth to 2 more sons, Sam and Michael. She taught herself to speak English and to read and write. She got hold of whatever books she could do. And actually, after she died, we found a lot of her notebooks where she had just copied things from books in order to teach herself how to write. And so she did start writing. In fact, she wrote a memoir called Remember My Child. And She also wrote poetry. In 1970, after her children were grown, or mostly grown, she began to bear witness to the Holocaust in order that it would not be forgotten or denied or repeated. She was a very strong woman who was raised by strong women. Both her mother and her grandmother imparted a good deal of wisdom to her. And they gave her the love and support which sustained her through her horrifying experiences, losing her entire family in one day at the gates of Auschwitz. When they arrived, they separated them, and she found out later that day that they had been taken to the gas chambers. Her mother's final words to her were, "Child, don't let them make you bitter." And she always held on to that idea. Also, when asked if she hated the Nazis, she said, hate destroys people, and so she would not hate them. But she always said that her revenge on the Nazis were her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She also wrote 2 books of poetry, and I would like to read a couple of her poems. This first one that I'm going to read is called "I Am Not a Number," and it gives you a sense of how she allowed herself to maintain her individuality, and it's an example of resilience, I think. I am not a number. I was trapped in the killing center of Auschwitz, surrounded by barbed wire, gas chambers, smoke, and flame. The Nazis tattooed a number on my arm. 25673 became my new name. They tried to reduce me to a number, dehumanize me day by day, but regardless of their efforts, they could not take my self-worth away. They murdered in the gas chamber my entire family in one single day. All my earthly possessions were so brutally taken away. They treated me worse than a hardened criminal, even though I did not commit any crime. They hated me merely for being born Jewish and starved and tortured me all the time. I was only 13 years old when they took away from me my right to life, but they could not take away my will to live and to survive. And another one, which just sort of shows how she wanted to make her children know what happened. And it's called "Show Your Face." Show your face, at least in a dream. I wake up in terror and hear your scream. Your images I see in ashes and flames. Yet still, I can hear your calling my name. Show your face. I am so alone. My mother and father and brothers are gone. They left me behind to carry the pain, to see that their death shall not be in vain. Show your face so my children can see the roots of our chopped off family tree. Heal the branches with your faith and love until we are united in heaven above. And I think that she found it was very important. She spoke almost up until 3 years before she died. She well into her 90s. She was still being called by the Speakers Bureau to come and speak to students, all kinds of groups, where she would impart her feelings of that you have to be aware of Menschlichkeit. She often professed Menschlichkeit, which was being good to other people, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. She also spoke a lot about her grandmother, who lived with the family when she was a child. And her grandmother died before the war, so she never saw, what happened to the rest of the family. But she always talked about the lessons that her grandmother told her, and it was always this grandmother and her own mother were the women who gave her the strength to survive this ordeal. My grandma was old. My grandma was wise. She gave me so much love. She gave me good advice. My dear sweet old grandma so often used to say, my child, you only have what you give away. So don't spare a hug, a kiss, or a smile. Remember, my dear child, we're here just for a while. I loved my sweet old grandma, but suddenly one day, my dear sweet old grandma forever went away. But her love and words of wisdom are with me till this day. My child, you only have what you give away. And in fact, these words come from a story she told about how a beggar came to their house in Poland, and her grandmother gave her some coins to give to the person at the door. And she looked at them and she said, "Grandma, so much." And this is when her grandmother said, "My child, you only have what you give away."
Wow. Thank
And
you, Anne. That's really, I think we can hear in the story a lot of the things that were brought up around caring and adults who imparted wisdom that carried her through. We can talk more about that in discussion, but I think right now, if are you finished, Dan? I didn't want to cut you off.
yes,
Okay. Amazing story, and how fortunate you knew her for about 30 years or so, correct?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wow.
unfortunately, she passed away in October of 2020.
Now you live on Shelter Island, and
Oh, yes, I do. I've been coming to Shelter Island for 40 years.
wow.
But 2 years ago, when I was going to retire, we decided to buy a house here. And so,
Great.
but I had no idea that I was going to be here permanently. I thought it was just going to be a summer house. And when COVID hit, we moved
Yeah,
back.
like so many, right?
Yes.
Impacted by that. Okay. I believe at this point we're going to go on to see Reggie Johnson.
Yay.
Reggie is someone that I mean, just look at that smile. You know, you just you know, tonight we're talking about some things that are of great magnitude in terms of the Holocaust, as well as a survivor of 9/11. And yet we have other stories that aren't quite as apparent. However, we know that, you know, we all grew up and we all bring things with us that create who we are and how we get on with life. And Reggie is a product of what they're calling now ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that he had to contend with that growing up, as well as living with racial bias and a number of things that you know, put obstacles in his way. So I'll let Reggie take it away.
Thank you. So like Lucille said, my name is Reggie. I am the head chef at Camp Quinnipiac, and I also live at Camp Quinnipiac here on Shelter Island. I came up here via North Carolina from Alabama. Well, via Alabama from North Carolina. I'm a Southern boy. I stick to my Southern roots, especially with my cooking. But yeah, yeah, like I said, I grew up in Alabama. I grew up to a single mother. I am the youngest of four. My older sister was placed up for adoption because my mom couldn't take care of all four of us, but she went to a family friend. And so, you know, it was me, my older sister, my older brother. We were three musketeers. We were thick as thieves, a lot of people like to say. And I don't know my biological father. He recently just got in contact with me. That's a story for another time. So, but yeah. So I grew up without a father. And then when my mom got married, I was about 5 years old. She got married to a man out of prison, my stepdad, and I thought it was the best thing in the world. Like, I have a dad, it's gonna be amazing. And then he got home, and it was good for a few months, and then we moved to his hometown. And that's where it kind of took a turn for the worse. Very abusive towards my mom, just watching my mom like basically getting punched and slapped and thrown around all over the place. It leaves a scar on a child, especially at the age of 6. And then once he was down with my mom, he came to me and my siblings, so he was like abusive towards us as well. There are times where I went to school, elementary school, with like whelps on my legs, but I had to like play it off and be like, oh, it's fine. I fell, me and my brother was like roughhousing or something like that. But it wasn't until 2012 where me and my siblings were taken out of the school, and not 2012, 2002, we were taken out of the school and we were placed into foster care. Because the word got back to Child Protective Services that our dad was not the best person. He was also selling drugs at the time. He had me and my siblings being his runners for him, and so they put us in foster care, and we were in foster care for a good 3 months before we were placed back into the custody of my mother. And once you got placed in the custody of my mom, to get us back, she told the judge that, yes, I'm going to leave my husband. I will not take my kids around him anymore. But that turned out to be a lie. And so once we got back into custody, it literally, the night that we got back to the house, the abuse started all over again. And then, so my mom ran. We went to the Adullam House, which is a house for battered women and children. So we were there for a year under their protection, them helping us get back on our feet. And then after we went to my grandmother, we stayed with my grandmother for the time being. In 6th grade, I was introduced, our school social worker introduced me to a program at a summer camp. Never been to a summer camp a day in my life. The only camp I can know in my head is Camp Crystal Lake, which is Friday the 13th. So that's what I saw in my head. I was like, I don't want to go, but my mom was like, give it a try, you will love it. So I did, I gave it a try. And at camp, the first night, the pastor, it was a Christian camp, the pastor there, he was speaking from Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and he was talking about from the Bible verse, and he said, this too shall pass. And that touched me. And it just made me think like, okay, I need to take control of this situation and I'm not going to let my past determine what my future is going to be from here on out. So after that week of camp, I made it my mission to go back every summer. I was calling on the phone to like the office at the camp, and I was like, okay, like what I need to do, like what my grades have to look like to get back to camp, because this is my safe place. This is the place where it's going to help me grow into the person that I need to be. So I went back many years after that. And then when I was 17, my mom started dating another guy. She just had the worst luck in men, but I love her still. But she met another guy who was also in prison, and when he got out, he kicked me out at the age of 17 because I was not paying the bills. I wasn't making enough money to pay the bills. And so I was kicked out, and the camp director at the camp I went to as a child pulled me to the side the night I was kicked out and say, I got you, but I want you to believe in yourself as well, and we're going to make this work. And so that's what I did. I believed in myself, and he helped me through everything in my life, from getting my license to tying a tie to learning how to shave, even though I don't grow much facial hair. But he just helped me every step and make sure I was good and getting my high school diploma. And then I also went to college. I went to culinary school. And once I was done with culinary school, I was like, okay, I am going to become the best chef in the world. You know, I'm going to like cook. My language is cooking, and I love cooking for people. So I was like, I'm gonna do this, and so I went to the camp and I was like, okay, I want to be y'all's chef. I want to be the chef for you all. And so they were like, okay, we can do that. So I became their chef, and then I worked my way up and I became like the food service director. And then I kind of grew out of that camp and I moved to North Carolina, and then was in North Carolina for about 2 years. And then I moved to New York, and here I am today. 2020 was a hard year for all of us. And it made me do a lot of self-reflection on like what I really want to do with myself, because I wasn't cooking. I was afraid to go cook at somebody else's house because I was afraid of getting sick. So I was like, I want to go back to school. And the camp director here, Brooke, was like, I think you should go back to school. And me deciding to go back to school, I was like, okay, what am I going to go back to school for? So I thought, and I was like, why not social work? You know, when I was a kid, my social worker took a chance on me, introduced me to this amazing program, and helped me become the person I am today. So that's why I'm back in school now. I'm back in school to become a social worker. I'm at Suffolk right now, and I'm transferring over to Stony Brook when I'm done with Suffolk to get my degree in social work. And at the end, I want to be able to give back and bring kids that grew up in similar situations that I grew up in and introduce them to camp and let them know like, hey, I got you, but you have to like believe in yourself to make it better. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of people that helped me get to where I am today. I am very appreciative. I look back at my past and I smile now because that also shaped me as well. You know, if I would have stuck with it, I would have been probably be in prison somewhere. So it's been great, and I'm getting emotional over here because like it's a lot to reflect on my past. I don't do it often, but yeah, I want to give back. Whatever I got, because I feel like that was the gift that God gave me. He gave me a heart to care for other people, and that's what I want to do. So
you are
that
really
is my story.
You're a shining example, and thank you so much for sharing all that. I know that, you know, sharing some of what we're talking about tonight isn't easy for our panelists, and you just have to say we're so appreciative, and can't thank you enough. And I know that you're going places because it's just really obvious that you've got the passion and the right attitude. Okay, so. Okay, now we're going to move on to Steve. And Steve will share some similar stuff in terms of growing up in a difficult situation, but in particular, the impact that substance abuse has had on his life, growing up in that kind of a family where that was a major issue and concern. So I'll let Steve tell his story at this point. Take it away, Steve.
Just had to unmute. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about my life. My connection to Shelter Island is this. My wife and I have been coming to the island for many, many years, and we would rent for a month or two. And this past year, we finally rented a place for year round. And even though I'm not on the island more than about maybe 25 to 30% of the time, I am involved in island life. I work as a school social worker, actually. And I do get a chance to send children who can't afford camp to go to camp. And maybe Reggie someday will take my job when I retire. So I just, hey, you never know. Anyway, so my story is this. I grew up with a parent who was a cross-addicted alcoholic in various forms of speed. And I didn't even realize that was going on. I didn't know what drinking was when I was a kid. I had no idea what drug use was when I was a kid. What I experienced and what my sister experienced was my mom's raging. She would rage. She would be hungover from a night of drinking. And then she would, try to recoup by using amphetamines in the morning and caffeine in order to kind of right herself, so to speak. But there was a lot of raging from the, from being hungover. So that's what we experienced, and this went on for many, many years. There was mental illness in my family. My sister suffered terribly when she was young. For me, what I did, my response was that I just became an action junkie. I just, I just was always on the move. I was what I would call a moving target, as a matter of fact. So I stayed out of the house as much as I possibly could, and everyone was affected in my family. We didn't know that we were affected. What I experienced was normal for me. I didn't know that until I actually went to other people's houses and saw, not everyone flies into rages for the smallest reasons. There wasn't a lot of what I would call physical violence. It was really, really, emotional violence. And it was very, very frightening, as I said, both to me and my sister. Somehow I got through it. But part of my story is that although I didn't develop physical addiction myself, what began to happen over time is I became emotionally numb. I became numb to my pain. I became numb to other people's pain. And I didn't even realize this. It's a process that goes on for years and years. And when there's no understanding of an alternative, that's just who I became. So it wasn't really until my 20s that I began to develop levels of anxiety and depression that I could not understand. I was always the kind of person, because of always being on the move, that I looked kind of competent in the world. And when I started to deal with anxiety and depression and not knowing what it was from, I never put together the connection to what I had grown up with and what I had seen in my own home. Sort of accidentally, I connected with an older gentleman who I knew, who was a teacher, and not from high school or college or anything like that, but he was kind of on the university level. I knew him from, I can't remember exactly what the connection was, how I knew him, but he also came from an alcohol-affected and drug-affected environment, just like me. And I once went to see him speak, and he started talking about, instead of the theory of what it's like to grow up in an alcoholic home, he started talking about what it feels like, what the emotions are like. And I found myself really, really connecting to what he was saying. It made sense to me. I felt like it was my story he was telling. And that he suggested that I go to an adult children of alcoholics Al-Anon meeting, which is what I started to attend when I was about 31 years old. And at this point, I was in really sad shape. I was suffering with insomnia. I had, as I said, a lot of anxiety, and I had such low self-esteem. I really, really hated myself, and I didn't know where this was coming from. But again, what happened is, I think all the feelings that I had repressed for so long were in my body, and they were coming out. And this is the way that they were coming out. When I did connect with in Al-Anon, even though every alcoholic home is and drug addicted home is different. Some are very, very violent. Some are very, very quiet and repressed. Mine was violent emotionally. But I connected to people's feelings. And all of a sudden, what I had was, I had a community of people who I could identify with, because for so long, I felt what I was going through was very unique to me. And there was something really, really wrong with me. Well, I found out, well, there's a lot of people who are affected by experiences like I went through. And just knowing that, just being able to identify with them, really, it just gave me hope. And I learned a lot of things. I learned, among other things, that addiction is a disease of attitudes besides being a physical disease. And that everyone in my family, whether they had the physical disease or not, had the disease emotionally, had the attitudinal disease of addiction. And I certainly did. What I also learned too is that I didn't cause my mom's drinking, whatever, kid behavior I didn't cause it. I couldn't control her drinking or anyone else's drinking. And I actually had a close friend of mine at the time when I got into Al-Anon who was cross-addicted between alcohol and cocaine. So I couldn't control him. I couldn't cure him. And that's another thing that I learned about. And these were very, very important things that that brought me into recovery. And I continue to go to Al-Anon meetings. I'm in my 35th year of Al-Anon meetings. I continue to go because what Al-Anon taught me is to keep the focus on myself and not to focus on other people and what they're doing, but keep the focus on myself and my own recovery. And also the thing with regard to resiliency, I want to say about my story is that isolation was the thing that was killing me. Even though I was actually physically alive, I was walking around breathing, I was dying bit by bit, emotionally, spiritually. And it was really community that brought me back. You know, the fact that I'm connected with other people. And you know, I've gone to Al-Anon meetings in other states. I've gone to Al-Anon meetings in other countries. With Zoom, you can go to Al-Anon meetings anywhere in the world. And I've done that. And what I love is that there's a similarity of feelings that people have no matter where they are. I think that just being a human being requires a certain amount of resiliency. And so, you know, I've learned to be much more forgiving of myself, much more forgiving of other people. And I really want to be of service. So, you know, the work that I do, for instance, with children as a school social worker is such a gift to me, you know, and it's an outgrowth of my resiliency. It's an outgrowth of really wanting to give back. And it's sort of like a form of recycling. But I will tell you this also, for all the rough things that I went through with my family, I would not be here without them. They also provided the fertile ground for me to be able to go after, you know, what I thought was important. And for me, it was working with children and working with families, and I do that. And I am planning to put into the chat my phone number, my cell phone number. If anyone who's hearing this wants to just talk about their experiences that are related to, you know, family addiction, I'm happy to do that. And I'm not offering that as a professional. I'm offering that person to person. So if you feel like talking, I'm really happy to reach out to you, reach back to you. Anyway, that's my story. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, as you're all telling your stories, you know, there's some common threads that, you know, resonate for me in terms of some of the things that I brought up earlier, but we'll see what we can connect later on. We'll move now to Nancy Butts. Nancy is a lovely person who lives on Shelter Island and has lived with a chronic illness since she was 5 years old. And being that we're going through a pandemic currently, you know, it brings back for many of us memories of the days of the polio epidemic, which we went through in the 50s. And Nancy is a person who was personally affected and still continues to live with the after effects. So I would like Nancy now to give us some of her wisdom in regards to how she was able to get through what she's gone through.
Well, I contacted polio in 1944 at the age, actually I was the age of 7. I was in a hospital for a year, but I went to bed one night as a perfect child, healthy, no symptoms whatsoever. I woke up in the morning and fell on the floor. I went to walk and down I went. The next thing I know, I was in an ambulance being rushed to the hospital. And needless to say, I didn't know I was going to stay there for a year. I was rushed to St. Charles Hospital in downtown Brooklyn. And it was just mind-boggling and scary. I was raised in an Italian household with my parents, my grandparents, and my aunt. Fortunately, they were the rock because they sympathized with me, but they didn't let me dwell on it. It affected my right leg, and I wasn't able to walk. I went to bed perfectly fine. As I said, when I got up, I just fell, wound up in the ambulance, wound up in the hospital, and after a year, I finally came home. After I got out of the hospital, in the meantime, at the hospital, they had hot packs. There were the nuns, the nurses were nuns. They worked 24/7 with hot packs, day and night, night and day. They never stopped. It was mind-boggling. It was St. Charles Hospital in Brooklyn, not the one in Fort Jefferson. After I got home, they had visiting only 2 days a week, two people at a time, which was quite hard because I was very family oriented. I was raised in an Italian household with my parents, my grandparents, and my aunt, who, because of my being stricken with the polio, I can't think. She put off a wedding for another year till I could walk down the aisle with her. After that, after I got out of the hospital, after this year of treatment, I was home. I was homeschooled for a while until my father finally said, "This is enough. You have to go to a school for socialization." So I wound up going to St. Agnes Seminary, all-girls school, private school that he found not about an hour away from the house. And there was they were bungalows. So there was no steps, and I could go to a regular school with real people instead of the home tutors. I did find our neighborhood was all adults except for one girl. I connected with her at the age when I got out of the hospital. She was not only my friend, but she was my bodyguard. She was so attentive to me, and she was just as tough as nails. Nobody could make fun of me, or she was just wonderful. She had 4 brothers, so she knew what it was like to be tough. I wound up going back to St. Charles for years for physical therapy. After my father decided that homeschooling wasn't good for me, I wound up in St. Agnes Seminary. It was an all-girls school, private school with a house and no steps. I went to the high school, but at that time there was 2 levels, and I was able to do steps after lots of therapy. In my 5th grade in St. Agnes, I met another girl who befriended me, and till this day, I'm still friendly with both girls. In the summer, I used to go because on the doctor's orders, he insisted that we come to Sag Harbor to Noyak Bay for swimming because the waters were so pure and clean, and I should, for exercise. So we come to Sag Harbor, my parents and I, and 2 other courtesy aunts and uncles. So there were, and 4 young girls, who one was my age and the others were a little younger, but they were my summer cousins. We stayed here, I swam, I did everything everybody else did. I learned to dance, because this went on yearly. After I graduated, after we did that for till we moved out here. Winters in Brooklyn and summers on the island. Um, I'm not too good, as you can tell, I'm nervous. When I graduated high school, I was coming to Sag Harbor because with these couples that we rented with for years, we're now getting ready to buy a house. My parents built their bungalow and the other couples did too, in a little tiny community of Noyak. So we had like our own Italian community from Brooklyn. After that, I met my husband, and he was a Sag Harbor person. So I moved to Sag Harbor, and I had a wonderful, wonderful life. I wound up, I had 3 children. I managed to get them to be very wonderful adults. They are so very involved in my life. I've had 8 grandchildren and 5 great-great-grandchildren. So I'm very blessed. And to my 3 children, I have to say, I really appreciate all you do for me, because I hear some stories where the children just don't bother, and mine are there. After I graduated high school, I worked in the Metropolitan Life Insurance in New York City. And then my parents built their houses out here, and that's when I met my future husband. I was married for 60 years, and everybody talks about resilience. 60 years of marriage is resilience. I've worked in the village office in Sag Harbor for a while. I worked quite a few jobs. And after a while, I found the job of my dreams. I worked for the Animal Rescue Fund of the Hamptons for 35 years. That's Orphan, Wainscott. In November 2017, I was diagnosed with post-polio. I got this, it was the same thing. I went to bed fine. I got up in the morning and I fell, and this time it affected my left leg. My husband had died in September rather, and this happened shortly thereafter. So back to therapy and more therapy and exercise. And at that time, we finally moved to Shelter Island. And it's where I belong. I did come under protest because I didn't want to leave Sag Harbor. But my husband, I guess, really knew what he was doing, because he passed away in that September, and I came up with this polio in November. I can't say enough about the Senior Citizen Center, the people that work there. It's just unbelievable. I feel like I have another family here. I just love them all. They know who they are. I can't mention names because I know I'll forget somebody. But I think I had a very wonderful life, and I thank my family, my friends, for all they've done for me. And I think, I don't know what to say. I listen to everybody else and I say, geez, I really never had a problem. But thank you for letting me share this a little bit with you, even though I'm a nervous wreck.
You did fine, and thank you so much. It's clear, your attitude and your perspective on life has carried you a long way.
Definitely.
Yeah, and all the support that you've had, and then finding a dream job, especially with animals, right? That's really something else.
I was there, and if I didn't get this post-polio that I can't drive anymore, I would still be there.
Okay, let's move on. Our last presenter is Ed Brennan, who certainly has a story to tell in regards to surviving 9/11. And I would, I, I don't think there's anything I need to say about that, except that I think we all experience collective trauma. However, we had firsthand exposure, and we still feel the residual effects, obviously. But I'll let Ed tell his story. You're on mute, Ed. You have to unmute. Ed, can you hear me? Uh-oh,
Can you hear me?
Can't hear you, Ed.
How about now?
Yes.
Can you? Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
great.
Rookie
No, that's
mistake.
okay.
So my name's Eddie Brennan. I have been coming to Shelter Island my entire life, really. I came here as a child, and in 1987, I bought a house here and have had one ever since. So 35 years, I guess. And it's always been a very special, very important place to me. But my story for today is about my experiences on September 11th. And as Lucille said, all of us, everybody who's in New York, everybody in the world experienced that day, suffered that day, and lives with the memories of that day. For me personally, having been in the building, I'll tell you my story. It was 8:45 in the morning on September 11th. I was standing at my position talking on the phone, arranging a trade between two banks when the building shook very violently. I was on the 26th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center, working for a firm called ICAP. There were about 350 people on our trading floor, all working around large desks. I felt like it was terrorism immediately, but I thought that the explosion had come from underneath us. The building had been bombed back in 1993 from the garage. Anyway, I said to my coworkers, let's get the heck out of here. Most of the brokers and support staff, not, just the people in my immediate vicinity, pretty much left. Some people hung out and watched TV and see what was happening. We had no idea what the cause of this was, except that, it was coming over the PA. We should also be probably getting out of there. I went to the stairwell, and upon reaching the stairwell, there were already hundreds of people from the upper floors headed down. Water was coming down the middle of the stairway, smell of jet fumes, and smoke was in the air. I remember nobody seemed upset or freaked out. I say jet fumes or smoke, but I didn't know that at the time. I say that in retrospect, that's probably what it was, but no one was thinking that. I remember nobody seemed freaked out. Women were walking barefoot so as not to ruin their shoes in the water that was coming down the stairs. But when we reached the plaza level, it sort of got real. It was a very bright day, as we all recall. And there are these high windows shaped like that in the World Trade Center, very, very tall. And several of them blew out right as I got to that plaza level, and the glass skittered across the terrazzo floor. There were Port Authority police there, directing people down escalators that had been turned off. Heavy things were slamming onto the plaza outside. I didn't know if it was pieces of the building or something else, and I didn't want to look. I made a conscious decision not to look out there. I thought we were being attacked, but by whom? You just don't know. So as I say, Port Authority police directed us down these escalators. From there, other officers moved us through folded revolving doors connected to the North Tower, through the Marriott Hotel to the Tall Ships Bar. And then even more police told us to run across Wall Street toward the World Financial Center and out towards the Hudson River. If you have a briefcase, hold it over your head, they told us. Some people grabbed lunch trays. Once outside, the air was filled with shredded paper and dust and tiny pieces of falling debris. As I reached the other side of the street, the scene was, often say, it's like something out of a disaster movie. People running, looking back over their shoulders at the black smoke pouring from their office building. And just then, the sound of a big jet gunning its engines, followed by an enormous explosion. I turned around to see the blowout of the second plane come in to the South Tower. Flames and black smoke shooting out of the building. We've all seen the pictures. That was 9:03, 17 minutes after I had first felt the building shake. I knew right then that no one at Cantor Fitzgerald would survive, including one of my best friends, a guy named Eddie Papa, a great guy and a great friend. I had known him and his wife, Patty. I'd known his wife, Patty, my whole life, and Eddie since college. Back in Seacliff, where we lived at the time, two ex-New York Fire Department friends had been sitting with my wife, Julia, and comforting her and telling her that I was going to be fine, that I had definitely gotten out of the building. They had a lot of experience, and they knew that the time between the explosion, the plane where I was, and the building falling down, buildings coming down, was way long enough for me to have gotten out. And of course, they were right. Back in the city, I was trying to find a payphone to call home. I found one at the South Street Seaport, but there was a line about 50 deep, so I really didn't feel like waiting right there. So I began to walk uptown. I was, as we were all walking, I'll tell a story that I didn't tell when we were working on this earlier in the week. I was walking uptown and there was this rumble, and some guy said, "I can't believe the subways are still running." And again, now there are hundreds of people walking uptown, and another guy goes, "There's no subway under here." And it was the building. I mean, that was the building coming down. Anyway, so I walked uptown, and I finally walked across the Williamsburg Bridge. I was able to phone home at 11:30 and talk to Julia. Then I walked to Maspeth, Queens, where I found a gypsy cab, and that took me home. When I got home, I was told that the two New York Fire Department friends of mine, Mike Lennon and Jim Carballel, had actually gotten in their cars once they heard I was okay and driven downtown. Mike told me that he was retired after losing his hearing in a fire accident. They weren't letting any cars into the city going west, and so he said, he told me later, I drove down the expressway. I hung my old fireman's helmet out the window, and the guys just waved me through, and he went down to ground zero. September 12th, which is kind of what this is about, right? This discussion tonight is about the time after, the dealing with it. Julia and I went to visit my friend's widow, though she didn't know it at the time, Patty Papa. And as I said, my friend's name is Eddie Papa, same first name as me. And she hugged my wife and said, "If your Eddie's okay, maybe mine is too," which broke our hearts, to say the least. On September 13th, I met with senior members of our firm in Jersey City to plan the way forward for our business. I was pretty much of a wreck at the time. Our servers and all of our data, the records of all of our trades, everything had been in the North Tower. The backup servers, copies of all those things were in the South Tower. And on Monday, September 17th, in borrowed office space on primitive computers over archaic landlines and burner phones, we began to rebuild our business. Our city and our country began the healing process, I feel like, around then. And, you know, again, I think today's discussion is about the aftermath, about dealing with it. Since every minute, every waking minute of every day was about what had happened at that time, there would be no room for denial. The horror of it was literally in the air. It was in the stench from the smoking remains. It was on television. It was on everyone's lips. About a year after the events of 9/11, again, I was at my trading position, this time in borrowed office space loaned to us by Michael Bloomberg. Gradually, it felt as if the walls were closing in on me. I was having an anxiety attack. I'd never experienced anything like that before. And so for the first and only time in my life, I met with a psychiatrist. I told her my story. She focused on my decision not to look at what I knew were scarring images of that day, the scarring images that day. You were already dealing with it, she said. She called it post-traumatic stress. That was what was happening to me. It only really happened to me a couple other times, and then I was kind of past it. So I think my strategy, if you can call it that, for dealing with it, fell into three parts in the days and months and years after. The first part was getting back to work, focusing on rebuilding what was taken from us and restoring our livelihoods. To do that, I had to go back to work 2 days later. I needed to show my coworkers, my wife and children that the world didn't end, that we were stronger than that. The second part was grieving. I needed to grieve with the loved ones of the people I had known that had been murdered. I needed to cry with them and to mourn with them. My coworkers and I attended dozens of wakes and funerals over the next few weeks. At any time during a trading day, four or five of us would just get up and leave to attend the wake of Timmy Coughlin or Joe Shea or his brother Tommy until there were no more wakes. And the third part was trying to repair my mind. I wasn't sleeping. Every thunderstorm caused me panic. I've never been to war, and I didn't have the tools to confront what had happened. So the third part meant coming here, back to Shelter Island. I texted with my friend Dan Berner the other day about this discussion, and I said, Shelter Island saved my mind. And so it did. And it does every day. That's all I got.
Wow. Shelter Island, perfect name, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've heard the stories, and if you're like me, you're in awe of our panelists and what they have shared with us tonight. And it's very wonderful and special that you did share your stories. And it's inspirational to all of us. I'm going to go back a little bit to the PowerPoint, just to a couple of screens, and then we will entertain the some questions. But by doing so, I'm just going to raise some of the characteristics that we know that resilient people have, and maybe some of this will resonate with you folks. Okay, the PowerPoint, where did it go? Let's see. I can bring it up. Share screen. Today. Not working for me. There it is. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so characteristics of resilient people. They have caring relationships, belief in a brighter future, socially competent, a sense of having control over your own beliefs and the ability to exercise your own functioning in events. I heard that from a few of you. I heard it from Anne when she spoke about Itka and her belief about having some control and wanting to do something about what she went through. And Reggie, you certainly said it when you sort of hit a point where you said, I've got to get it together and decide what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And it's going to be up to me. And Steve, similarly, I mean, I think I heard this as a running theme. Resilient people usually have the ability to be adaptable and flexible. Sense of humor, critical. A sense of purpose, and that comes up, I think, too, in everything I've heard from you all. Good problem solvers, that helps a lot. Having a special skill or talent, which also came up. And, you know, some of what you spoke about, Reggie, obviously. Also, some of the activities that you've been involved in, positive peers, relationships. Nancy talked about the friend that had her back all the time. Reggie and the social worker and the people you met through the camp. And I think at some point you had mentioned to me, you didn't say tonight, but there was some support groups that your husband was able to go to for children of survivors. And obviously Steve getting involved in a structured program that almost has a plan book for life, Al-Anon program. So a lot of these things resonate for me. And I will basically turn it over to anyone who would like to speak to some of these things. I'm going to take this off again and allow you to have a discussion with each other or things that you were touched by in terms of what was being said. And we'll take it from there. If there's questions, we'll go from there. So you can unmute yourselves. And if there's some questions in the chat, we can take a look. Okay. We had some nice comments in regards to appreciating your stories. I think some of the things I'm curious about is if, you know, when you heard others speaking, did you connect with some of the things people said that you didn't get, you know, share yourselves, you know, say, oh yeah, that happened to me too, or that was something I didn't think about, but had an impact in a very positive way on my life. Does any of that sort of resonate with you, any of you? Anything in particular?
I guess not.
What would you say in terms of, you know, things that you have in common? You know, I can see them, but I'm not sure you all do. But it seemed as though there clearly were people that were very important, which was the number one protective factor, was having, you know, somebody in your life, you know, that was a caring adult or positive peer. Reggie, I heard your brothers, you were very close with your brothers, obviously the social worker that you met. Steve, similarly, one of the things too that strikes me about your story, Steve, is that in some of the studies, they found that the youth who were presenting and doing pretty well managed to, do well, get through school, etc. But then there were those that actually did succumb to some issues around maybe using drugs or alcohol. But most important is that they did resurface in their late 20s or early 30s to develop a more positive lifestyle and remembered some of the things that actually helped them get through when they were younger, and they resurfaced because they were able to see, this is enough of the stuff that I'm doing that's not really helping me. I actually do want to have a purpose and get it together.
Did you want me to comment on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, I grew up in the 70s, and I didn't know anyone who wasn't using alcohol or other drugs. So, my peer role models were all using too. But I will say this: my mom did get into recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she always spoke openly about addiction with me. So that's something that I kind of had, that was in my foundation, that a lot of my friends didn't. My friends' families were riddled with addiction, and nobody ever spoke about it. My family, to some degree, was also as well. I had an uncle who was an active alcoholic. I had a heroin addicted cousin as well. And, I think just those kind of conversations, planted certain types of seeds. And you know what, honestly, I wanted to survive. I really, there was a period of time when, I didn't want to survive, and I would have just been happy to just go to sleep and not wake up. And I think that also seeking a certain spiritual connection too. I remember praying for the first time when I was really, really scared, when things were going badly. And interestingly enough, I found myself connecting with this older gentleman who was, became a really good friend of mine. And it got me into program. And I think, there were a lot of positive things that I did get from my family that did kick in. So, it's so hard to predict, but I will say this: I can't do it alone. I don't suggest that anybody else who's trying to recover do it alone. I think community is vital.
And I think that's in all the stories.
I have a question for Reggie, and that is, did you ever become bitter and want to lash out, in response to some of the things that had happened to you, even at people who were uninvolved in it? And if you didn't feel that way, how did you not? I mean, I feel like if I had been treated the way you had been treated, I'm not sure I would have been able to have such grace as you've shown.
Thank you. I did feel bitter towards my stepdad a lot, and but it wasn't until I was about 18, where I felt like I had a lot of my grace comes from my faith. Just having that and knowing that I'm okay. But I felt like I wanted to lash out at him. I wanted him to hurt as he hurt us. I wanted all the terrible things that happened to him, anything under the sun, but I started realizing, like, that's not going to help me become the person that I want to be in the future. So I have to let it go. Instead, that's what I did. I let it go. I forgive him. Do I talk to him? The last I spoke with him, he apologized. And this was when my sister passed away in 2018. And that was it. I don't talk to him now, but I do forgive him, and I have to keep moving forward. I'm going to keep a smile on my face, because I can't let what happened to me as a kid control me now. I've grown from it, and I'm doing my best to just keep moving forward with it.
Yeah,
so
cool. That's great.
Amazing.
That was also Itka's philosophy of just moving forward and not hating. And but one of the other things was she just had this incredible will to live. Just, I mean, even on as she was dying, she said, "I don't want to die," and she. I think it was that will to live that kept her going and able to survive. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think you all have a lot of those qualities as well.
Yeah. There's some of the innate qualities of purpose and hope for a brighter future and belief in that really can carry you. You're going to say something, Reggie?
Yeah, it's just my city, which is my adopted family now. My grandmother, my adopted family, she always tell me that hatred gives you wrinkles. So I try my best to try not to hate anyone. So it's like I don't want to hate anyone because it just sits there and it just makes you feel so negative.
Yeah, it's wasted time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things you brought up, and I heard it a little bit too throughout, was the importance of a spiritual frame of some sort, whether it be an organized religion or a belief in some kind of higher power. That also presents as a very positive attribute in terms of being able to help with certain morals and beliefs, and also people within the organization, if it's a structured religion, to turn to. In the studies that Warner and Smith did in Hawaii, that they found that the Jehovah's Witnesses that were the residents that were studied were primarily part of, really helped the young people because of the structure that they provided. It also had the elders in the church that they could turn to. And similar to you, Reggie, saying how I think you said you went to a neighbor's or a relatives or something, but they had a lot of where they looked out for each other. If something was going on in one household, if somebody had to, an alcohol problem and they had to go to treatment or something, the neighbor next door might take the child in. There was a sense of community, which, what we're hoping we see on Shelter Island. I see it. I don't live on Shelter Island, and my coming to the island and learning about it, it's been almost 5 years now. I see that piece in regards to community as so critical for you folks that are there, and knowing that, if you put something out to the community, whether it be on your Facebook pages or wherever the local information goes, people step up and help each other, and they're there to be with each other, and it's a beautiful thing and so important, and the connections are critical. And obviously living on an island, just that in itself puts you in a place of, there's some resiliency that you got to have in order to sustain the lifestyle over there. It's not like you can drive off the island so easily. If it, the ferry closes down, you're there, or you're on the island. So, which brings us to the fact that we're facing a blizzard, and you guys have to deal with that on what happens over there. Is there anybody else that wants to raise anything? Jocelyn, you're checking the chat?
I'm checking the chat, and I just wanted to share with you that so many people mentioned how grateful they were to the panelists for sharing their stories and being open about their experiences. And there were several comments of that nature, and people were very moved by this program. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. And some people have similar stories. Someone mentioned that 12-step fellowships are very helpful. Another person mentioned that school social worker told her that resilience is sometimes connected to intelligence, but mostly just a lot of thank yous from the attendees. I think you froze, Lucille.
We need people who have gone through something similar. Makes you feel like you're not the only one, and that in itself is.
Oh, someone has their hand raised. Let's see.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find that person.
But anyway, working, being in a place where you can talk to other people, you feel like, oh, it's not just me, I thought I was alone here, but nope.
There's a term that's used about with regard to that, Lucille and everyone. They call it terminal uniqueness. Not a term I made up, but the idea that when we think that we're the only one who's got it,
Yeah, that's not good.
it's pretty deadly,
You're,
and
you're
that's
alone.
where
Yeah,
that's where I
you're
was.
alone with it, so
Right.
that's why being able to talk about it and express your feelings
Mhm.
and trust somebody is a big step, and maybe the first step too in turning your life into a different story.
Faith Evans
So
has a
did you figure out
question.
who got that?
There's her question is, I guess, to the panelists in general. Do you ever find yourself in moments where you're reminded of the past challenging times? And if so, how do you handle it? And that question is for anyone on the panel.
Well, I can speak for me in saying that one of the great advantages to being involved in a 12-step program and having community is I reach out to people. For instance, I have a sponsor in Al-Anon who I call, and I have friends who are either connected with program or have a similar sort of philosophy, I'm going to say. So again, it's reaching out to people, which is where in the past I wasn't doing that, before I got into recovery.
That's another quality, being able to ask for help is another
Right.
characteristic.
And not being ashamed of that, not being ashamed of asking for help, because
Not at all.
Yeah.
No. And I was wondering, being that this was the 20th anniversary, and there was a lot of activity, as well as a lot of the media and the showing again of a lot of the filming and the seeing it all over again. How did you deal with it?
Never watch it. I really, for me, I've never really watched the coverage. I don't find it particularly useful. I think I shouldn't, for people who lost loved ones, I think it probably, for some of them, it is a comfort. But I also believe that we need to move on. There are tragedies throughout history, and we move on. We don't. I mean, the Holocaust is in a place all by itself, and of course, that I'm not sure we ever move on from that one. But I think I'm not sure, at least for me, how healthy it is to revisit ad infinitum what happened.
I
I don't watch it.
My mother-in-law spoke a lot to many groups, and I heard her speak a number of times because she came to our school. My husband and I are teachers, and she actually never really talked much about the story of being in concentration camps. She talked about survival and how you behave and how you go forward in your life, and so
there's a similarity there with that.
I think about it like, and there's no one on this panel who is talking about having the awful experience of losing a child, say, but when that happens to someone, that's part of their life forever. That happened. That scar doesn't go away. That is a living scar across your mind, your heart, your brain, and you move on. What you don't do is think about how that person may have lost their life. I don't think that's a healthy way for anybody to behave. And so I think the people who are most successful in dealing with that, and again, you're permanently scarred, are the ones who are, as Anne said, moving forward, and talking about the better person you are because of it, or things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, the media and the coverage is, phew, you know, I agree. And it's the same as today, even, you know, we're bombarded, and even
It's a
more
little
so.
bit about getting people to watch their stations, you know, like
Yeah, yeah.
more than
They
consoling people.
keep adding more news programs, you know, it doesn't stop. I think on Channel 4, they go from 4 through 7 or something now with the news, and it just keeps repeating and repeating. And it's like, ah, but yeah, no, I think, you know, you're absolutely right. And something tells you it's not healthy for you and it's not good for you. And like you even some of what, you know, you said when you were going through it, you were able to innately kind of get a sense of, that's something I don't want to see. I think it probably won't help me, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, not easy, not easy. Okay. Well, we're getting down to the wire, and I know, Anne, you got to go pick up your husband. Jocelyn, is there anything else that we need to address?
I think we got all the comments and questions. Just a lot of appreciation from everyone that came for what the Health and Wellness Alliance put together, and to the participants for sharing so much. And
Okay.
a lot of people that it resonated with, this program. So that's about it.
Me too, believe me.
And thank you all so much.
I'm going to share the screen one more time if I can get this up. I just 2 different slides I wanted to show, and get it up again. Okay. Come on. Ugh, didn't come up. Let's see. There we go. Choose. Okay. Don't want to make you dizzy, folks. I'm sorry. Okay, I just wanted to finish. Let's see. There should be a couple more slides here. Uh-oh. It may be. Oh, here we go. You've probably heard this quote before. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, so be kind always. And I think that that's something we hear. A lot of what's going on for you guys, we don't see it on the outside, you know? You wouldn't know. And I wanted to share this last slide, which was Itka with her parents. Remember, my child, no matter what they do, don't let them make you hateful and bitter. Don't let them destroy you. As they stood at the gates of Auschwitz, Itka's mother shared these final words with tears in her eyes before they were parted forever. Itka was 16. Oh, you can't see it? I just found out you can't see it, but I read it. That's a picture of Itka with her parents. Do you see this, folks? My contact information? Oh, she's holding it up. I don't know if you can see my contact information. Not showing. I don't know why. Let me see. You are screen sharing.
If anyone needs any information, you know, call me at the library. If there's something that you missed, I can share information with people.
I don't know why it's not showing, but I'm not on the right screen. My daughter is prompting me. That's okay. Whatever. I just had, if you need to contact me, you can get me through the town website. I'm under services, and I'm very honored to have been part of this tonight. And I also want to thank the people that helped make this happen, all the panelists, of course, and the Health and Wellness Alliance, in particular, Bonnie Berman Stockwell, Nancy Green, Lori Finelli, Jim Colligan, Jocelyn, of course, and I'm sorry if I don't remember everybody else, but it's been a very special time to work on this and be able to meet you folks, and look forward to meeting you on Shelter Island at some point. So thank you so much. Oh, well, came up on mine, but not on yours. Anyway, okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lucille. And I guess we'll, with that, we'll say goodnight. And thank you for pulling it all together, Lucille, and making sense of it all.
Well, I'm trying, but you know, you're the ones that you know, inspire me. And there's a lot more I could say about the things that you talked about, but I think that, you know, you said it all in your stories. So thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey,
Good night.
be careful out there.
Thank you.
And
Night.
Yes, be
I hope
careful.
you're prepared for the storm.
Yeah.
Be resilient.
Lots of thanks
Bye,
for
bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.